All right, this is Ordinary Madness, episode 22. I'm Steve Barker, and with me today is artist, spoken word poet, Matt Gano. And because it's National Poetry Month, we're just going to start right off with a poem. So take it away, Matt.
The earth wants to keep her diamonds. She knows our minds are full of soot. She knows what we are looking for, and that we're searching the wrong places. Everything is pressed together tight. All the lights are on and blinding. We are deep in the mine, but nothing is ours. The streets are buckling because the earth is stuffed full. The diamonds in her eyes are not for plucking. There are legions of assholes who want to pluck out the earth's eyes. I am still a young boy, and you are who you once were. We are here together, wherever that will be. I am not an imposter. I have work to do, and so do you. The earth still wants us. I want to finish more of what I've started, be more garden-esque, like the rake in the tool shed. Less like the shed and more like the tools. I should actually stop being a tool. Who am I fooling? Myself is easy to pull the wool over. My blankets are down and cozy, and I'm in there, some days, up to my nose past noon when rain does the streets like a cold disco. Cars hustle down Madison, construction harps on the morning hour. I sleep through it now. Not very sound, but I do it. Everything here is wild pony, outstretched empty arms sky, thoroughbred plains seeking the edge. Everything here is running free. Nothing is in its place. Disjointed braids, it's all amazing. Nothing is insane. Everything here is wild pony, an hourglass sky filling with bone dust, a thorough breed. All the bases are covered. The acids are in their places. My spine works against the grain. It filters through the still. A silo fills with dust and bones. Horsepower throws the lever to my eyelids. I wake with diamonds in my eyes and forget to write down my dreams. I forget all the things that I've considered, but I know everything that is new, is really old, ancient even, retold with shiny skin, that the path to where I'm going leads to places I've already been. How amazing the scenery is. Everything looks better with love on it. The eyes of my lover are dark and soft. They remind me how vast and gentle the dark can be, that there is someone waiting for my arrival, who pulls me out of the mine, who readies me for the still. The clock in the photo booth never shows up on the still. Still it is there. Its hands are winding us down one flick at a time. In the frame, the shadow defines us grainy. We consume the grain. The earth wants to keep her diamonds, our minds, the love. The horses in our sleep gallop out from the mine. We are hard and covered in soot. But she wants us anyway.
Right on. Thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Steve.
Yeah, gonna thank the person who lives upstairs for opening and closing their sliding door during that.
Yeah, a little extra bass never hurt nobody.
Hopefully that didn't come up on the mic. But so let's get right into it. So, where are you from, and when did you get into writing, get into poetry, get into performing?
All right. So I grew up in Tri-Cities, specifically Kennewick, Washington, southeastern Washington. I don't know if there was an actual moment that sort of sparked it, but I had an epiphany back a few years ago that my love of language sort of came from my dad reading my brother and I Shel Silverstein when we were kids. He would read it every night, and he got to the point where he had most of the poems memorized and would act out the poems, right? So, and even just actually the other night, I was like, maybe that's where this performative aspect comes from, because my uncle is a blues musician and he's been a writer and a performer, but there's not really a whole lot of history of performance in my family. So I was kind of trying to figure out where that came from. But in high school, I was always amazed and sort of intrigued by underground hip hop and like the way that MCs use language and the way that rhyme and sound is created through language. So, growing up in Kennewick, there wasn't a lot of kids that were really into like real hip hop.
What years were that? Like, what was some of the underground hip hop that was?
Yeah, so this was like the height of it, right? Because I was in high school from like '94 to '98. So
it's the exact same time I was in high school, and that's when it was good. Man.
That was when it was like legit, right? So,
yeah.
But my friends and I like prided ourselves on really like finding the real underground shit, like really digging and like,
right.
And so like I loved like the hieroglyphics and which are on the West Coast, and like the artifacts which are on the East Coast, and like of course Nas and Biggie, and like everyone here loved Tupac, so I was into Biggie, and I was like it's like so anti like teenager thing to do, and like
right.
But I just had this such a love for language. I would memorize all their verses, and of course Wu-Tang, like the RZA was like, oh man. I had so many RZA verses memorized, like the perpendicular to the square, stand bold like flare, like the whole, like, all the verses that nobody could understand what the hell the RZA was saying. I was like, right. I would sit there and rewind and play that shit. I was actually just doing that before I came over here on a hieroglyphic song classic. It was like Dell's hook on that verse. It's like, I don't know what the hell he's saying. So I was like, I really want to know what he's saying because it sounds so cool, and like, and there's something about the combination of meaning along with that intricate rhyme scheme that was always really intriguing to me. That's why like hieroglyphics or freestyle fellowship like AC Alone and Abstract Rude and those cats were always like, I was just like amazed by them, and like continually listening to those songs over and over until like it was just embedded in there. And so and in some way I think that was maybe me just like knowing that was my studies,
like
practice like that was my studies. And so that's a lot of that has built like a wide range of sound in my work, and like that comes through in some ways,
So did you start writing rhymes like when
you
were listening to that?
Totally. So my buddy Liam we were all skaters too, like skateboard kids, and so we were like the hip hop skateboard kids, and like we would freestyle and like cypher, and we didn't really know what we were doing, but we were, because we didn't have like a metropolitan area to really relate to, but we would see the videos and shit. It's when MTV still played music videos.
Right,
there was like underground hip hop videos, like when the Black Eyed Peas were actually the Black Eyed Peas,
before
like
Fergie.
When they were dope, And I remember seeing Fuji La like came on like MTV, and like I just remember like that video and Lauryn Hill sitting there, and I was just like amazed by like how dope they were, And I was like, this is real music, like this is really dope. And so, I mean, a lot of that influenced what we were doing, and Biggie specifically too. Like Ready to Die was like a huge influence on me, and even like Nas, like Illmatic, of course, like those two albums had a big influence.
Got Nas with the Last Supper
you got
there.
You got the portrait on the kitchen wall for sure.
So when you were writing these rhymes, were you and your buddies making beats too, or was this just all like just acapella messing around type of stuff?
No, I mean, because this is before like people had computers to make beats on. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there was like Fruity Loops like a few years later, but it was still like so slow. Nobody was really making beats, so none of my friends had the technology to actually like cut up beats. We didn't have like an MPC or an 808 or anything like that, so that was the problem. That's actually how I started writing spoken word poetry, which I didn't even know existed. So I saw the movie Slam with Saul Williams. That came out like 97, maybe 96, something like that.
That sounds about right.
Something like that. And so I didn't even know that. So I was like, I would go to parties, and I kind of got known for just going to parties and like freestyling or like just spitting a cappella raps, basically, which were like poems, but nobody had any context for it at that point, so they were just raps, basically.
So you didn't really even realize you were doing quote-unquote slam. You just thought you were...
Yeah, I thought I was just writing, like, lyrics without beats, because I didn't have any, and so I was like, but I knew that I wanted to rhyme. I knew I wanted to write rhymes. I knew I had, like, this, like, propendency for doing that, just this, like, natural ability, and, like, it was something I was very much desiring to be able to do, and so... I saw the movie Slam, and I was like, oh, this is actually an art form. People are actually doing this, like rapping without beats, like and like calling it slam, and I mean that movie's funny too because it's not really about slam at all. It's like, but he does form in that. And so Saul became, I was really like, oh wow, like this dude is legit, like this dude is dope, and he's so imaginative. He's so imaginative, and like, you know, his imagery is very surreal, and but also very rooted, you know. And so that became an influence. And so all of that hip hop that I'd been studying, along with Saul Williams, and then I discovered like Buddy Wakefield when I was in college, and like, you know, all these other folks that really were starting to push the art form, and so that's kind of where it developed.
So like Shel Silverstein, the RZA,
yeah.
Saul Williams.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
Nice.
pretty much, man.
Cool. So when did you actually take, you know, the rhymes that you were, you know, messing around doing at parties or writing down, and like take them to the stage? And
So
actually, did you hit open mics?
Yeah, so that didn't happen until I moved to Bellingham. I went to Western, and I went to Western to study poetry, basically, because, you know, my parents were always supportive. They wanted me to do something. You know, I was going to tell the kids tomorrow that, you know, I have a very distinct memory of fishing with my dad and coming back from this fishing trip and telling him that I wanted to be an MC and a lyricist. I was like, cause I listen to all this stuff, and like, I'm better than like most of these guys. Like, I can do this, you know? And my dad's like, well, he's like, you better study something worthwhile, because the possibility of that happening is slim to none. I was like, but that really motivated me. I was like, fuck you, man, I'm gonna do this shit. You know, they're supportive. They're like, you know, they always believed in me, but my dad's like, you know, he's a logical scientist type of person, and very, you know, rational, and like, and so I was like, I'm gonna show you, you know, like, and so, but, you know, I've always been good at writing, and I've always, like, you know, wanted to pursue that. It's the only thing that I've ever been really good at. And so, you know, my parents were supportive of me going and studying English, getting an English degree with an emphasis on creative writing and poetry, and like, and so I went to Western and did that, and ended up like connecting with James Bertolino, who's my professor at Western. And, you know, he's like a legend in his own right. You know, this guy had work archived at Cornell in his 20s, you know. It's like, he's been around, he was involved in the beat era, and like, he's kind of seen like all these movements through poetry, and he's just a goofy, like, crazy dude. And so we hit it off right away, and you know, I made a point of, you know, visiting him on his office hours, because I felt like I needed a mentor. And, you know, we write very different types of poetry, but he was always welcoming and open to, you know, helping me evolve.
Did he like take an interest in you, kind of?
Yeah, because I mean, I was, you know, he recognized what I was doing, and, you know, he'd talk to me after class, or, you know, I mean, and I was succeeding in his class. You know, I was like, it was obvious there was, you know, me and a few other my cohorts who I'm still friends with now, and we were really like standing out in his class. And so, you know, he was building us up, you know, because he was excited that we were doing interesting stuff. And
what type of poetry was that you were writing then? Was it the slam type, or was it more poetry on the page type of
It was
work?
very lyrical. It was very free verse and lyrical. I didn't have any idea of, you know, forms or anything like that. And I was very resistant to form, and I was very resistant to like anyone telling me what sort of structure I should be writing in. And like, I thought that by, you know, using all this rhyme and like being so lyrical, that no one could put me in a box and all this stuff, which actually the opposite. Right. You know, like, it's actually a very like amateur way of approaching things in the long run, like in the giant scope of things. But at least it was when I was doing it in that way. But yeah, and so he encouraged me to come down and check out the Poetry Slam, because, you know, I was really writing these impassioned, like, almost like political poems, and I cringe when I look back on what I was doing then. It's just like, so young.
Yeah, you know? Yeah, everybody does that, man. If you look back at the stuff you were writing 15 years ago and you think it's awesome, you haven't progressed at all.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so that, I mean, and that true to that, because that's one thing that I've always held dear and made sure that I was doing, was continue to learn, you know, and build, and never be satisfied with where I'm at, you know. And I think that's something that we have to do as artists. If you want to make it as an artist, you know, you have to continually be pushing yourself and always be sort of looking for the next thing, and looking for how you can build off of what you've already established, you know.
Right on.
Yeah. But so when I went to Western is when I started performing poems. They had open mics, and actually the Stewart's Coffee House was where the Bellingham Poetry Night first started. And I was, me and a couple other kids, Josh Seidel, who was Judas from Cancer Rising. Do you remember the hip hop group Cancer Rising in Seattle?
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, so Josh and I lived in the dorms next to each other, and he'd already been there for a little while, and I showed up, and so he was kind of sizing me up at this open mic and stuff. We became friends, and we had this sort of like mutual respect for each other, because he was more of an MC, and I was kind of like, we kind of diverged. He went straight up like the MC path, and I went more down the path of being a poet, lyricist, sort of, but I always wanted to be an MC. That was like something that I was still striving for, and I didn't really know how to make that happen. But and it's still, rhyming and all that still big.
Well, a quick question about that. I know you have a CD out. Is there any poems that have beats behind it, or is it all just a cappella?
Yeah, all of the ones that are current. The Music Maker CDs that you're asking about?
You got one on if you go to mattgano.wordpress.com, it has this whole resume.
Oh, yeah.
I know there's a CD.
Yeah, Music Maker. It's just 8 tracks of like a cappella, like in the studio, But I would love to. I think, and it's good. It's cool if you want to just hear the words, but I would love to have music behind that eventually, And actually, I do have a whole hip hop project that I've been working on with my man. Chris Carroll, who goes by Spoke. He actually just put an album out called Ghost, and it's beautiful. He's an amazing artist. He was actually one of my understudies in Youth Speaks when I first came to Youth Speaks, but then, as time grows, the mentees and the mentors, the distance sort of shortens, and so he's become, like one of my best friends, and definitely taught me a lot too. But we were working on a hip hop project a few years ago called the Gold Fronts. And it was very experimental and like sort of, I don't know, next level alien shit, like talking about all this, I don't know, love and peace and understanding the universe and coming from different planets and all this shit, like. Right on. So we were talking about some crazy alien space talk, But
that reminds me of. Did you listen to Styles of Beyond?
Yeah, Styles of of course. Yeah, Styles of Beyond.
Guys. They were always talking weird alien shit.
Yeah, definitely. Those guys were dope. Yeah, 2,000-fold. Yeah, definitely. So I just started doing back to performing in Bellingham, but now the Bellingham Poetry Night is like one of the most revered. Like open mics and poetry nights in the state, it's that one and the Seattle Poetry Slam are like the 2 top spots to like get a feature at, and so for in terms of having like an open mic and that type of night, so it's been evolved by Robert Houston. He kind of came in and took over. He was real young, and just evolved it himself, and he's still running it. And he's kind of like runs the show up in Bellingham now, and so I'm actually going to be featuring there on May 7th. So anybody up in the town, up in Bellingham, come check me out. It's at the Amadeus Project now.
Right. What time is that?
8 o'clock.
May 7th?
May 7th, yeah. On Cornwall, up in Bellingham. It's Cornwall Avenue. So yeah, and then, like I said, Bertolino just influenced me. He really told me to come down and check out the Seattle Poetry Slam and see where I fit in. And I didn't really know what I was doing, and I didn't really know where I ranked amongst poets in this city, because I knew that Seattle already had a high reputation. Like, there's some dope poets down here. Buddy Wakefield was here at the time, and Karen Finney-Frock, and all these people who are now like some of my best friends and like favorite people on the planet. Roberto Ascalon, and but I came down, and the first night I came down, and I was doing this poem about taco trucks, like growing up in Kennewick, and there's a lot of Latino influence, and so but something was not right with the poem. It was kind of off, and it was a little bit like the sentiment was kind of could be misconstrued. And this is the first night I was at the Seattle Poetry Slam, and Roberto Ascalon pulls me aside, and he's like, there's something not working about your poem. He's like, you need to fix it. He's like, come back next week. He's like, I want to hear it after you fixed it. He didn't tell me what to look at, whatever. Yeah. But I was driving down from Bellingham and then driving home after the slam at this time. And so on the way home, I like rewrote the poem in my head. And then I came down the next week, and he's like, yeah! He's like, yeah, that's what I'm fucking talking about. And so Robbie really took me under his wing, and he sort of like introduced me to everyone in the scene. And him and Damon Arundel and Karen Finney-Frock kind of became my like older poetry siblings, like really.
That's a good group of talented people to have.
Not bad, right? And Jeremy Richards was very kind to me too, and Christina Nation at the time and Karina McGlynn. Like these people are like those were the hot, you know, Chauncey Burry and who else? Yeah, those were the people that were really doing it at that time, and they really took me under their wing. They really appreciated what I was doing, and I ended up and Laura Peace Kelly, you know, and so I was slamming. I was trying to like do what I could do, and I ended up not qualifying during the semifinals, or not qualifying for the semifinals, and so I entered the wild card slam, which is like 16. It's like a double.
And
slam.
Are you still in college at this time?
Yeah, well, I'm living in Bellingham at this time. This is 2004.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm living in Bellingham. I'm driving down here just to like, you know, I'm on the hustle. I was like trying to do it, you know, and but I was driving home every night after the slam. I drive down on Wednesdays, and I drive down on Wednesdays and do the slam, and then drive home.
Damn, that's a trek.
Like after some drinks, and the last like 8 miles to Bellingham is hella sketchy in the dark too. It's all windy, and it's like that's not a good idea. Don't do that. But I entered the wild card slam, which is like a double slam, 16 poets, and it was like Tara Hardy, Laura Peace Kelly, Rajni Edens, like people that are like legends. And I fucking won the wild card slam.
Against Rajni and Tara Hardy?
And Laura Kelly, like Peace, and like all these people that I was like, whoa. And so, I mean, that's like the hardest slam to win because, and I went first.
And so at this time, did nobody even really know who you were?
Nah, not really, no. And I went first that night, the way that slam works, it's reverse order for the second round.
Right.
So I went first and 17th. Basically.
Yeah.
So I had all that space in between, and I somehow won, which was crazy to me, and I made it into the final, which was at the Black Cat, which is some underground bar, different name now, in Pioneer Square. I don't even know what street that's on, but it's like
I don't even think I've heard of that.
It like
spot.
goes underground, and it's like you.
Oh, like the Owl and Thistle.
No, it's up from the Owl and Thistle. It's like right near the square where they do all the outdoor stuff for the art walk, where everything's outside. It's like near there. It's next to a big sports bar. Now I don't remember what the name
I don't know that spot.
Anyway, but I made the team. I took 4th place, and so if you place 1 through 4, you make the team. And I took 4th. I had just enough. I beat Buddy Wakefield to make the 4th place on the team, which was insane. And so it was my first time, you know, and it was crazy because I had not envisioned I envisioned that as a long-term goal, making the national slam team.
Right.
And it was something that just happened immediately, you know, and so that really propelled me into this, like, oh, I should be doing this. Like, this is what I should do. And so. And then I came back the next year and won and made the team again. I think I took 3rd or something. And then
well, and then 2008 you won the whole Grand Slam, right?
I won the whole Grand Slam in 2008. So this is the progression of things though. So 2006 I missed the team by 1/10 of a point, which was Buddy Wakefield, Anis Mojgani, and Ryler Dustin and Tia Nishay Fields, who had beat me out by 1/10 of a point. But that was her first time ever slamming, and she didn't even really know what she was doing. And she's awesome, but she was like, oh, I don't think I'm ever going to do this again. Like, you know.
Right.
And I was like, damn it. You know, 1/10 of a point. So I was kind of like bummed. I was really, I don't think anyone had made the team 3 years in a row at that point. So I was like, oh, I'm going to I'm going to go for it.
Yeah.
So that was 2006. And that ends up being the slam, the Down to the Bone DVD. There's like a DVD of that actual slam. And so my hair is all crazy. I look ridiculous. But, so I took the whole next year off. I was like, nah, I'm not doing slam. I didn't want to do it. But then 2008, like, that was when Chris and I started getting together, and we were talking about, like, and I'd, like, broken up with my girlfriend at the time, and, like, I was all in the dumps, and Chris and I met up again, and he'd all been into, like, Buddhism and, like, meditation and, like, the power of now and, like, all this shit, you know, and, like, The Secret and all this stuff. That's when all that shit is, like, popular. So we really started talking about all that shit and, like, manifestations, like, manifesting your fucking presence and all this shit. And so So I just started, 2008, I just started going to the slams, and I just started telling everyone that I was going to fucking win the whole thing. I was like, I'm winning it this year. I was like, I'm Grand Slam champion, I'm fucking winning this shit. This is like,
so you used the
6
secret?
months in advance, dude. Yeah, like 6 months in advance.
Did you make a board, like a secret board, and put pictures on it?
No, but I did like meditate. I think I did meditate. I was meditating all the time, and like I think I wrote about how I wanted it to go, but I mean beyond that, I just had better poems at that time. You know,
Right.
I'd been writing poems, like I just hadn't been slamming, and so I was just coming in. And also, during that break time, I had a discussion with Mike McGee and Mighty Mike McGee, who Mike is hilarious. You know, he's one of like my favorite poets, and you know he's just like a stand-up comedian along with being a poet. And I was telling him, I was like, I don't know, man. Like, I would really like to write funny stuff, you know? Like, I think... Yeah. He's like, yeah. He's like, you're fucking hilarious, dude. He's like, you're a really funny person, and you're very witty. He's like, you should be that on stage. And so like, just Mike giving me permission to do that, like, telling me that I could do that, like, really sparked something. And so that was when I started really being more myself, instead of trying to take these ideas and live through them. I was allowing the ideas to live through me on stage, right? So I was actually becoming the poems on stage, which is, I think, the essence of this art form. Like, you know, there's a disconnect when a poet is just up there and you can tell they're just reciting something. But when you're up there and you are actually embodying that and being present in the moment, and like, you know, it takes a long time to figure out what that really means, or it took me a long time to figure out what that really meant, like to be present and be the work, you know, be on stage and embody those poems, or allow those poems to speak through you, you know, or you to speak through the poem, whatever, however you want to say it. But so that was a whole like paradigm shift in my approach, and then 2008 I ended up winning the Grand Slam again. Stanley Sherrard, Tara Hardy, and Karen Finney-Frock, and Wombley, and Greg B. And it was an all-star cast, and I was like, nice. It was pretty dope. So that made me feel really good. And then 2009, I missed the team by a tenth of a point again, and that was pretty much the end of my role as in the slam. So I didn't really like go for it in 2010. I didn't really care, and then 2011, I was just like, eh. And then now I'm just kind of like, I love being there. It's just participating in the slam is not really the poems that I'm writing now, and like I think what I want to do is not really conducive to that. And but I give all the credit. I give a lot of credit to who I am and where I've come from that scene. You know, like I've developed my voice through the slam, and I think a lot of ways that's, you know, what it's really good for that. It's really good for having a young writer like figure out who they are and develop their voice. You know? But I also think like there's room to evolve too. You know.
Yeah, right on. Well, speaking of that, do you want to read another poem right now?
Yeah, sure.
And any chance you want to read one of these funny ones that you were just talking about? Or, I don't want to put you on the spot. Read whatever you want, but...
let me see. What can I do with it? Let's see. Well, I was going to read...
Oh, no, it doesn't matter. Whatever you were planning on it. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Well, this one's kind of funny. This is a good poem, actually, to finish our conversation on this, because it's about growing up and it's about fishing with my dad.
Perfect.
And it's about, it's about finding out who we are. It's called Launching the Whale. It goes like this. My dad is a carpenter, sort of like Jesus, but he doesn't believe in God. His holy space is drills and grinders, roaring teeth spitting chips and dust. When I was 12, we built a canoe from strips of cedar, ripped boards for weeks. The frame in the garage was scaled like an empty whale, bones lurching from the shop floor. We arced on its new skin with glue and heavy staples. Dad wore a green down vest like a tortoise shell. He said it would comfort our shop mammal to be built by something familiar. As the frame was full with hull and keel, we plied out the staples like final stitches removed from a recovered experiment, ran our hands down its sanded spine, the work painting into our palms, our pores absorbing the bonding. When we rode the whale, we launched it from the shore like pushing a dead cow back into the sea, boots in the shallows filled with lake water. It would take us to the middle, where the big fish are, where the casting rods bend like cottonwood over glass, dance jigs, whipping back and forth, dragon tongues. This is how we sit. Me, navigator bow boy, front paddle like the steam engine is tugboat, but little boat. Dad is stern, rudder man, power in the deep dig. He spanked the water good, like it forgot to take the garbage out. We pull the trash from the beaver dens and replace them with good sticks. He says they don't know any better. The babies will get the soda rings around their heads like the Spanish Inquisition and die slow. We don't want them to die slow. Keep rowing. Hard on the left. Watch out for the log. I see the log. The log looks like a floating dog. I put my paddle in it. It sank through like a fork in cat food. It was a dog. Belly sticking out like helium and rot. See how its canines are chipped and peeled back? Must have been eating marmots. Sometimes a stray dog will eat rocks if it's hungry enough. My dad is a scientist. He doesn't believe in God. His holy space is lakes and bug guts. It sells through him when we walk on the roots and slipping path of the Yakima Valley. We Swiss blade open on the pond. Make ripples like loons, hoot hoot against the quarry for the echo. Make campfire dance with pucker-mouthed lip wind and sizzle up the iron pan, washing in mountain water. When the tent got the squirts with dew, and the embers burn down, cracking like mosquitoes on Dad's neck with his slapping, and it's dark as bears. Morning peeps over the ridge. And we are simple, heirloom pocket knives, carving memory into the tree.
Right on. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, so before we were talking about all these people who kind of took you under their wing and kind of mentored you, and now you're pretty much doing the same thing to a bunch of kids, like in the school, and you're also a youth slam coach too, right?
I haven't worked with Youth Speaks in quite a while, actually. It's been a few years, or a couple years, but I was for a while. I was a coach for 2 or 3 different national slam teams, Youth Speaks national slam teams, and a chaperone and mentor. You know, we went to all the Brave New Voices from like 2004 to 2008. I think I went, to every one of those, all 4 of those, and so yeah, I worked with those kids a lot, and actually, so a lot of those kids that I was working with are like the shit now, like Mary Lambert and Rose McAleese, and like these girls are just murdering the scene. Like, these girls are dope. So and Danny Sherrard and like, Danny and Chris Carroll were like 2 of my first like mentees, I guess you'd call it,
Yeah.
And the truth is that those 2 characters like taught me a lot about writing too. So it was very much an exchange. I was sort of mentoring them on like, maturing with their work and like evolving their work, but their creative minds and their imaginations like really opened a lot of stuff for me too, and so there was a lot of like give and take and a lot of reward in that. And
right.
I think what I found doing that was being a mentor with Youth Speaks. That's kind of where my whole career as a teaching artist started. But what I found was like I was achieving like a high level of reward because it was something that I needed when I was their age, and to be able to provide that and like be a stable like figures, and like and talk about my experience as a poet and connect with them on that was like really cool. So
right on. Do you think in the slam community it's kind of a cycle like that? Because I actually posed the same question to Sarah Brickman, because as far as every other art form, whether it's music, other types of writing outside of slam, it seems that people who are involved in slam, like you, Sarah, pretty much everybody I know is involved with helping kids or helping the community, or is just like a positive person on the community. Mm-hmm. Do you think why is that so much in slam as opposed to regular poets, or just
like you don't see a lot of musicians out there like teaching kids how to take their job and shit.
Right, and there's plenty who do it. It's just not the number of people in slam. It's almost it's like 95%.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that there is some of that where there's an an urge to give back, and continue the community, because I think people realize too that poetry is not like the most it's not the most revered thing in our culture anymore.
Right.
Even in its form of being accessible, and it's become like a phenomenon. Like, this is the new movement. But even still, it's still not like a mainstream thing. So I think a lot of people realize that we have to provide for our own community and lift up the people who are coming up, and also as a writer, I mean, at least for me, like, it's exciting to see young people who are really doing it, like, who are finding that voice and progressing the art form. So it's encouraging to me to see that, and like I can't help but offer my insight, and I don't know if that's just a natural, like, some sort of instinctive thing, like, I don't know what that is, and like I don't know what that is in me, but I mean, I do feel in a lot of ways that, like I said, like, a lot of it for me is that I didn't have that when I was their age, and so it's important for me to be able to provide that now that I can be in that position, right?
Yeah.
And also, like, I think Seattle, in a lot of ways, Seattle is unique, though. Like, this is not happening.
Is
everywhere.
It not like that everywhere?
I mean, it is. There's youth programs, but Seattle is very. I think a lot of people here are a lot more selfless than in other places. Because honestly, it's not the grind here is a lot less imposing than other places. Like, the grind in New York is hardcore, man. Like, you're trying to get yours, and like, I mean, there's a lot of people that my friends, John Sands is like working with kids, and a lot of people out there are working with kids too, but a lot of people out there are just trying to get theirs, and it just takes more of their time. They don't have time to work with kids.
Well, even with your peers, where you guys are technically competing against each other, it seems like everybody's still friends, and like, you're not like,
definitely.
Oh, fuck that guy, he beat me, or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, because it's like, I think as artists, we all appreciate dope art, and we all appreciate someone that's really doing something, and we're all, I think, if you really want to be an artist, you got to pay attention to who's around you, right? Like, what was that quote, like, good artists borrow and great artists steal? So it's like, tune your ear and like steal that shit, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, totally.
And like, so why not steal from like your best friends? Like, well, it's like, I think it's all conducive. So I think that's some aspect. You know what? And like, the bottom line truth, if you want to get really real, like, it's really hard to make a living as a poet if you're not making some supplemental income.
Right, totally.
And if you want to live as a full-on artist, like, figure out how to teach, man. That's because if you can teach your craft, if you can teach something that's unique and that is like marketable and that people want, then that is like working with youth and finding money in doing that. Unfortunately, the money has to be a factor, but it also, like, it allows us to live as artists. Like, I get to be a full-time poet, like, working with writers in the schools and teaching my craft, and
yeah. Well, speaking of that, why don't you tell us what you're doing tomorrow? So you're giving a lecture, right?
Yeah, I was invited by Billings Middle School up in Green Lake to come be a motivational speaker and a lecturer, performance lecturer, for like 60 middle school kids who are working on group projects centered around the idea of work and what that means and all of the different sort of contexts that we can find work for. So I'm going to be performing about 6 poems, and I think I was telling you before we turned the mic on, I've sort of like laid out a little map of these 6 poems and found ways to I guess found ways to sort of show who I am through these poems, and the evolution of myself and the evolution of my imagination and creative approach and all this stuff. And so I'm really excited. So that's going to be fun.
Right on. So how did was that just because I know you're right, you work with writers in the schools. Was it just through that and they just found you?
I have no idea. The dean of faculty sent me an email, and she said that she had been reading about me and had heard that I was, I guess she said I was highly recommended and came highly recommended, and she thought that the work that I've been doing sounded like a great fit, and so she hit me up on my WordPress page, so on my blog. So I'm imagining she was checking out some of my resume and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And speaking of that, mattgano.wordpress.com.
Yeah, that's the current website. I'm trying to really do a real website. I've actually been supposed to do that for like the last 3 months. My guy Steven, who is a marketing consultant, who's been doing shit for free for me. Like, he's been consulting me for free, and I was just like, I was supposed to do it in January, and I've just been putting it off. I don't know, man.
Can people buy your chapbooks through your website, or how?
Not yet. So what?
Chapbooks,
yeah, well, that's part of the plan. Like, I'm gonna get that website established. I'm actually supposed to. He's like, I got an office now. You're gonna come to work with me and sit down in my office and do this shit while I'm at work. Because you know what I mean. I just work at home. Like, I'm at home all the time. Because I mean, my schedule is pretty open, and so it's hard for me to like stay focused and just do that. I'm like, my brain's all over the place.
Right, but you travel too. So like, how did you get involved in like teaching in Hong Kong and teaching in Korea? Was it poetry or was it just English?
No, I was a guest artist in residence at both those places. So the one in Korea, that was 2008, end of 2008, I think. I was invited to be a guest speaker at the Haja Center in Seoul, which they were hosting a youth creativity summit, and so they invited students from Hong Kong. The school called the Lee Soo-Kei School of Creativity, which was an alternative school, like an experimental school in Hong Kong, and a dance school from Russia. And then their school at the Haja Center is like an alternative arts, creative arts high school in Seoul, which was like crazy over there. I was talking to the kids and like, my parents don't want me to be here. Like they think I'm crazy. Like,
and were these all English speaking?
A lot of them spoke some English, pretty like okay English, enough for us to be able to communicate, because I didn't have enough time to learn any kind of Cantonese or Korean before I went over there, or Russian for that matter. But how I got that was an interesting thing. So in 2008 I was at Nationals, and I wrote this poem about the moon. It's called To the Moon, and Anis Mojgani and I had been friends previously, but we hadn't really like talked, or like, I mean, we'd been acquaintances, but at Nationals, like, I read that poem, and something struck a chord with Anis about that poem, and so we sparked up a conversation, and he just was really like, he was just like, man, that poem is really speaking to me, and so we became closer, and like we kind of became friends, and so a couple months later, after I came home, I guess they had invited him, but he was already on tour and couldn't make that date, and so he had recommended that I take his place.
Oh, nice.
So they contacted me, and then like 3 weeks later, they were flying me to Seoul to like come and teach creative.
How long were you there?
That was like 2 weeks, I think. So that residency was just like a 2-week short residency. But from there, the principal and the English director of the Lee Soo-Kei School of Creativity in Hong Kong, really, their kids were really excited about being in my class, and kept telling them that they wanted me to come to their school. And so they sat down with me before we left there and sketched out how they could bring me to Hong Kong the next year. And so I had like, they hadn't, it would been like 8 months or something since I'd been there, and I hadn't heard anything from them, and I thought they just kind of like, man, they probably, let it go. And then I get an email from them, and they're like, we want you to come out in September. This was like, I think in July or something.
Wow. And
they're like, we want you to do a 3-month residency from September to December, like first semester residency. And they'd offer to pay me what I asked, which was like $7,500, and a plane ticket, and an apartment in like downtown in Wan Chai, which is like on Hong Kong Island.
That's a sweet deal. When you're talking to those kids tomorrow about work, you should just be like, dude, just go to Hong Kong for 3 months.
It was awesome, man. It was so cool. It was just an amazing opportunity, and Hong Kong was so cool. I had a great time there, and I met.
Did you go to Stanley Market at all?
Oh yeah, totally. I lived right above a wet market, like in Wan Chai in Causeway Bay. So, I went to Stanley Market, and I went everywhere. I was there for 3 months, So by the time I left, I was actually getting recognized in places. There's not a lot of like white people there,
Right.
And so I was like being recognized in places, and I was hanging out in this bar called what was it called? 774. I can't remember. 7 7-7 or 7-6 or something like that. But anyway, it's the date was like of a political revolution. The bar was like named after the date of a political revolution. But it's where all the artists and like even some of like the even some of the triads hung out there and stuff.
Damn.
And like so it was kind of like a pretty controversial bar to hang out in, but
Yeah.
but that's where all the real artists in the city were hanging out. And so
Right.
so I became, this guy Gong Qixing like took me under his wing, and he's like a world-renowned violinist, and he's like totally crazy. He's got like the long gray beard and like long gray hair, and like he looks just like a Chinese wise man, like
Right.
And so he was, but he's so cool. He was like he's like a total drunk and like crazy like musician like artist.
Nice.
He introduced me to like the seedy artist underground of Hong Kong and stuff, like which was not very big. Like literally there's not a whole lot of like original art, like music happening in Hong Kong actually, because people work so much. There's just not a lot of time for people to do that. So there's definitely a culture. There's definitely an art culture, of course, but it's not like what you'd find in like New York City or something, where it's just everywhere, or here even. So that was kind of a shock to me, because like and they don't really know hip hop there. There's no real like hip hop scene there, which was interesting to me. There's like 3 hip hop groups in all of Hong Kong and all of 7 million people that live there.
Yeah,
it's so crazy. It's really.
Wait, did you perform at all while you were there?
Yeah. So I was like, I got to perform. They were doing these street music festivals once a month in front of the art museum and stuff, and Gong was like putting them on. And so Qixing in Cantonese means crazy. So his name is Gong Qixing. Like he's just like crazy. So that was real fun, man.
Like, what type of reaction were you getting when you were going up there and doing your?
Everyone
poem?
is really polite, Like
yeah.
Like Hong Kongers are very sweet people. Like they're very polite. So even they didn't understand anything I was saying.
Yeah.
But they like clapped anyways. Right. Like they're like, "Oh, so good." Like, I had no idea what the hell I was talking about. And so I was just like, "All right." I was like, "I don't care. I'm just gonna do my thing." And like, I don't know. And most of them speak English. Like so, there was less of a language barrier than I was expecting. But that was a great experience, And then I came home after that, and then I got to do an East Coast tour in New York, and I featured at the Louder Arts and the New Eurekan, and I did some stuff at the Bowery, and I met a bunch of really good people out in New York. And Taylor Mawley happened to be at one of my readings, or he was at my feature at Bar 13 for Louder Arts, and then he invited me to come back in 2011, so last year. In April, I went back and did another East Coast tour for Poetry Month. And
Nice.
so I did Page Meets Stage with John Murillo, which is Taylor Mawley's show out there. And John Murillo is like one of my favorite poets, and he's just dope. Like him and I actually connected when I was there in 2010. We ended up doing 3 shows together, like unplanned, but we just ended up like being co-features the whole time I was in New York. And so
Nice.
and then I ended up going to DC, and he was actually going to DC that same weekend, and that's where he went to school. And so we ended up like kicking it in DC, and he showed me around DC. And so he's just a great dude, and like an amazing writer, and he's like the hot shit in New York too right now. And so it was like a total privilege and honor to be featuring with him for Taylor Mawley's show at the Bowery Poetry Club, like all that history and like all that prestige. It was really dope. And at 2010, I also met Samantha Thornhill, who's a guest artist and residence at the Juilliard School. And so...
Oh, wait, yeah, speaking of that, you did a lecture at Juilliard, right?
Yeah, so Sam invited me to come be her, like... She invited me to come be a guest lecturer for her first year actor students at the Juilliard School. And so I came and I taught 3 classes.
Teaching classes at Juilliard.
Of first year actors at Juilliard, yeah.
Damn.
Which was really cool. So
did you call your dad up and be like, "Yeah, when I told you I was going to be an MC,
yeah.
look where I am now"?
Yeah, I didn't have to say that. He already knows now. He already knows by now, But yeah, they're pretty proud of me. I have a letter from Juilliard thanking me, and with the honorarium included and all this stuff, like on my fridge. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Nice.
yeah, that's a pretty big deal, man. That was really cool. And so
that's huge.
Yeah, so in that same time I was there, I got to feature at Louder Arts again for their semifinal, which was a pretty big deal. And I didn't do the New Eurekan again that time, but yeah, I love being in New York. I mean, I was really on my grind that time, and first time I was there, I was like, oh, I'm gonna move here. This place is awesome. Like, I love this place. And then last year, I was there for like 2 weeks, and I was really like on the hustle the whole time. And I came home, and I was like, man, I love Seattle. I was like, I love my easy life in Seattle. Like, because I have everything established here. I've been working at it for a long time to be comfortable, you know. And like, I was like, I don't think I'm gonna move to New York right now, because that's just sort of restarting, you know, like, I mean, I have enough connections there that it wouldn't be too difficult, but it would still be, you know, I'd have to rebuild that foundation, and things are going really well here. I love it here, so I'm here. Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, we're getting close to out of time. Do you want to do one more poem before we get out of here?
Yeah, that's actually a perfect transition, because the last poem I wanted to do is a poem that I wrote inspired by some breakdance kids that I saw on the L train from Brooklyn to Manhattan. And it's actually, so this is a sestina. This is a form poem, actually. So bringing it full circle, like talking about, you know, not wanting to write in form, but then finding my voice, performative voice, and finding a form that allows for that. So some of what I want to be able to do is take these forms that are the traditional forms, but also implement my own style and voice into them, so that they become my own thing, I guess, to some extent, or allow my own voice to influence the form, you know, instead of the form to influence what I'm doing, right?
Right on.
So this is called Kings. Down the spine of Canarsie Line, with big city balance, a two-man wrecking crew swings body control into top rock, dancing proper with style. Our subway car quakes, 10 square feet, aisle is the dance floor. They take form, popping between stops, hitting the brakes. L train lurching on the track, the conductor brakes for Bedford. All passengers with errands to balance on a Saturday, reluctantly aware of the show forming in front of them. Windmills in a storm control the attention of even the most jaded. The dancers' feet thunder the rubber floor, tiger style. My man pulls a series of backflips like a turnstile and kicks into his 6-step, steady rocking breakbeats on the blaster. We all clap in rhythm, our feet tucked beneath the benches. Harmony balanced with the pop and lock of the MTA. It's controlled chaos as the congregation forms the cipher. A circle is the perfect formula, a divine code that lassos the body with style. The freshest kids move with lack of control only in appearance, footwork unbreakable, each step planted by giants balanced on the slack rope rails like circus freaks. On a warm New York weekend, 100 feet below the East River, westbound to Manhattan from Brooklyn, we witnessed the art of balancing raw charisma with bone dance gymnastics, style like the dynamic rockers, early icons, real breakers take it to the streets, but only kings control the subway. Holding court without control of the crowd is no task for mere foot soldiers. It takes high command to break out the box and ruin someone's comfort zone. For what seemed like decades, time rewound wild style, back when doing it underground was crucial to keep balance. As the steel horse of control is unbridled by the ghost, and the style in our gait admits the potential of our feet, impulse forms the sacred when silence breaks. The dancers hang in balance.
Nice. So before we get out of here, do you have, you mentioned one show you got. Do you have any other readings coming up that you want to plug?
Oh yeah, definitely. I am very honored to be invited as a performer and panelist this year at the Skagit River Poetry Festival in LaConner. It's a pretty big deal. Karen Finneyfrock and I are the first spoken word poets to be invited to the festival.
Wow.
My name is on the bill with likes of Nikki Giovanni and Tony Hoagland and Sam Green, and so it's a big honor. I'm really, really excited about this opportunity. So
cool.
The Skagit River Poetry Festival is a very cool happening. So if anyone wants to make it up there to LaConner,
what's the dates on that?
It's May 17th through the 19th.
Right on.
Yeah, so I'll be on a panel answering questions, and I'll have a feature performance, and it's gonna be a great weekend. I'm really excited.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Steve.
Yeah, totally. And check out some more stuff. mattgano.wordpress.com. Soon to have a new website, possibly.
I'll put the link on there.
Email me, steve@ordinarymadness.org. I just joined Twitter like 12 hours ago. It's ordinary Podcast. Like it on Facebook. Thanks a lot, Matt.